Hello, everybody, and welcome to our September 2025 Learn with the Nerds event. My name is Andrew Perez. I'll be your trainer for this session, and I've been really excited to talk about this new feature that we'll be covering today. Our topic of interest is going to be generative prompting with AI Builder. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with AI Builder, this is a feature of the Power Platform, allowing you to train different AI models to perform in all sorts of situations, whether it is text extraction, sentiment analysis, or any job where the average dynamic content outputs really wouldn't be able to perform. Now, this can be used in either Power Apps or Power Automate to enhance your solutions. For today, we're going to focus in Power Automate. Now, most AI models from AI Builder need to be constructed. They need to be all put together, fed a certain amount of data, and trained for a certain period of time to be able to work. Generative prompting, however, allows you to perform complex generative actions with nothing more than the average AI prompting skill. So if you have asked ChatGPT a question before or asked it to create something for you, then you will probably be able to sink right into generative prompting with very little extra skill required from you. To prepare for today, there will be a few requirements. First and foremost are the student files for this event. They can be found down in the description below. They'll provide some dummy data, records, and files for us to test our models with, but they're not necessarily a hard requirement, as you can feel free to use something of your own for each of these demos. Number two, you are going to need access to Power Automate as well as an environment in which you can build flows. Now, we'll stick to using the standard Microsoft Office 365 connectors, and so a standard license should work just fine. You do, however, require AI credits to utilize the AI Builder functionality. Now, these come either from purchasing AI Builder capacity upgrades, or certain user licenses will come with a preset amount of credits, such as the Power Automate Premium plan, for example, which I believe grants around 5,000 credits per month. Trials are also offered on the AI Builder page for any users in organizations without credits. Consumption of AI credits is reset every month, but it's perfectly understandable if you wish to be cautious in your use of them. That is totally okay. If that's the case, then feel free to watch along and take notes for this session, and then apply any learned lessons whenever you're working on your own flows and your own solutions. Third, you're going to need access to standard Microsoft Office 365 applications. Particularly, we will be using Microsoft Forms and Outlook for the majority of this. And then lastly, a hard requirement for this course, even if you have nothing else, will be your imagination. As what we're covering today can be applied in so many given scenarios, and it's limited only by pretty much what you can come up with this. So if you are all ready to move forward, then let's jump right into our first demo, explore what generative prompts can do for us. So for our first demo here, let's go ahead and jump to a scenario that I'm sure is relatable for a lot of you out there. So you have just completed college, or you've completed some training program or certification program, programming school, whatever it might be. You are currently in the position where you need to be looking for a new job in a new field, right? So very, very exciting. Until you decide to go out and pull out your resume from 10 years ago, right? You pull out your resume, dust it off, look at the words on the page, and you begin to cry profusely, right? And you start looking up other resumes online and comparing yours, and you're realizing that what you made 10 years ago for what might be a high school project is not really going to cut it out there in the world, right? We've all been there, nothing to be ashamed of. Definitely had that experience once or twice myself. So this is going to need a little bit of fine tuning. Okay, so you crack down for the night, you decide to get to work, start working on this resume, and then in the morning you go, you ask your family, you ask your friends, say, hey, how does this look? How can I fix it, right? That's perfectly fine, but I'm going to be entirely honest. If I am your friend and you ask me 20 times throughout the week how your resume is and how I like this font, eventually I'm going to scream it, right? I'm going to lose my mind. So humans only have so much patience. What we're going to do, a little bit silly there, I'm sure, but what we're going to do is we are going to create a solution using this generative prompting that will be able to accept our resume, give it an analysis, give it a score of 1 to 10 of how good it is and what what that field maybe might be looking for. All right. And then maybe afterwards we can ask our friends and family to look at a fully completed resume when they're a little bit more patient and a little less tried by our constant poking and prodding. So to begin with this, the way that I want to structure this solution, we're going to start off with Microsoft Forms. So Forms is just a general application that I'm sure the majority of people are going to have access to. It's a standard Office 365 program. We're going to create a form that's going to allow us to log 3 things. Number 1, I want to log the email address of the person who is submitting this form. Number 2 would be the industry that the person submitting this form wants to go into work in. And then number 3, I want this form to accept their resume as a file submission. Now, I'm going to be beginning here in make.powerautomate.com. You may be thinking, whoa, Andrew, hold on. You just said that we were going to forms, right? I did. We're going to get there, but we are going to come back around to make.powerautomate.com in just a little bit here, since this form is really just the stepping stone of our project. Now, the reason why I'm coming here is from the Power Automate Maker portal, you can very easily, through the beauty of single sign-on, open up your app launcher up here in the top left corner next to the words Power Automate, and you should be able to see Forms somewhere here in your Office 365 apps. Now, if it does not come up initially, immediately when it's on here, don't lose hope just yet. There is a More Apps section where you can peruse all of the Microsoft 365 apps that you have access to based on productivity, utilities, education. I have Forms here as well, but I happen to use it pretty regularly, so it did show up in my initial search. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Forms, and I'm going to create the form looking for those 3 fields. So if you get any pop-up messages, we're going to go ahead and clear through those, and let's make a new form to test this out. There we go. As much as I do love using Copilot, I am going to go ahead and get rid of this. I don't need a Copilot draft about my form. I'm going to title this form my resume submission form, because I'm incredibly creative. After that, I'm going to come down to this quick start option, and the first question that I want to ask the user, it's going to be a text string. In this text string, I'm going to ask for the user's email address. So enter your, and I'll be specific and I'll say Outlook email address. There we go. I am going to be using Outlook later on down the line. There are connectors in Power Automate available for Gmail and other email sources, but again, Outlook is a general thing that I think everybody will have access to. I'm going to go ahead and add the next question. Next question will be relatively interesting. What industry would you like to work in? There we go. What industry would you like to work in? So it should be just a 1 or 2 word response here. So I want to work in the health industry, in nursing, in logistics. We'll do something relatively general. You can probably feed it some more specific answers than this. I'm going to add one more new question. This last question is going to be a file upload. All right, so I'm going to select upload file. Now it's only going to be a 1 file limit. I'm not too terribly certain what the size of my file necessarily is. I'm going to go for 100 megabytes. I'm not sure how wordy some of you guys' resumes may get, but that tends to be a poor practice if it's pretty wordy. So you may want to make it concise. And I will say upload your resume. All right. There we go. This is the form that we're going to work with. It will already have saved itself. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Power Automate. So like I said, we're going to be coming back here anyways. That's why I had my Power Automate tab already open. If you didn't and you went straight to Forms, again, you can go to make.powerautomate.com. Now in Power Automate, this is one of the places where you can check, all right, I am in an environment that is specifically tailored for me. It has my name on it, and it will allow me to build flows. If you want to check if you're in an environment that will let you build flows, if you click on your environments here in the top right, ta-da, here we go. All your environments are categorized into other environments or build flows environments. If your environment is under a category called build flows, congratulations, that is an environment that you can build flows in, so that is one prerequisite knocked out. I'm going to go ahead and close up this panel here. And let's get to building this flow. So I'm going to come over to the Create section. And this is going to be an automated cloud flow, all right? So flows have the three types of triggers: instant, which is a button press; scheduled, which is the time. This is going to be based off of an event. When somebody submits something on this form, this is when my flow should kick off. So a lot of the standard procedures of flow design are still going to apply here. So with this automated cloud flow, I'm going to go ahead and give it the name of, let's say, my resume checker here. All right, my resume checker. I don't follow any particular naming convention because I am just kind of testing out these flows. But if you want to make this something for you to keep, there are plenty of naming conventions out there for how to name your Power Automate flows. The first trigger that came up for me was when a new response is submitted in Microsoft Forms. That is exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and select when a new response is submitted. If that does not automatically come up for you, feel free to search through your triggers and you'll see it come up. Let me go ahead and hit create. All right. It said invalid connection for a second there, and then it kind of fixed itself. Let me go ahead and click on my trigger. And then I'll have to select the form that we're going to be tying this to. I just created it. So my resume submission form. Let's see, where is it coming up? Am I blind? Here we go, resume submission form. All right. Now, for those of you who are Power Automate veterans, you know that when a new response is submitted, that trigger does not generate all the necessary dynamic content that we're going to be needing for this particular flow. So we're not going to be able to get the responses until we give it a sister action from Microsoft Forms as well. If you go ahead and click to add an action here, and we're going to search for Forms, the other action, and really the only action in Microsoft Forms, is get response details. Go ahead and add that in. That needs to be done in conjunction with when a new response is submitted. In your get response details, for these parameters, the form will be the same. So we'll do the resume submission form. And there's only one thing it's asking for, the response ID, the unique identifier of the form response that we are trying to tie this to. This is going to be the only piece of dynamic content that is generated from your trigger. So you're going to go ahead and click into your response ID field, click your dynamic content lightning bolt, and enter the response ID. And now this get response detail step will give us the dynamic content of everything else in our response. So that is all of the fields and the file that will get uploaded. All right. Now, next up is figuring out how on earth we are going to get that model to see our resume and compare it to the requirements of that industry. Right? So just thinking about it, even just saying it just there, I felt like I was getting a paragraph out. Just thinking about it and thinking of having to do it with AI Builder is already, it's going to give me nightmares tonight. I feel it. With these generative prompts, this is an incredibly easy thing to do. After your get response detail step, we'll go ahead and add another action for the AI model. Now, there is a category in your actions referred to as your AI capabilities. And underneath your AI capabilities is an AI Builder action called Run a Prompt. All right, this is how your generative prompting is going to work. So you're going to go ahead and select Run a Prompt. There is only technically one parameter for this action, and that is what prompt are you going to run. If you hit the drop down, there are a ton of prompts already in my environment. There may be a ton of prompts already in yours. These are coming from our other AI models that we can build up and train if we would like. So we have a prompt directly for sentiment analysis, for extraction, for classifying. But to show you how these things get created, this is also a good point to note that when you create a prompt, you can use it in several flows in your environment if you've got something that works. For what we are doing today, I'm going to go ahead and create a new custom prompt so we can see what is added in. It's going to open up a little pop-up here for us to create said prompt. All right. So the way this is going to work, this is just the creation and testing window. First thing you're going to do is you're going to come up to the top and you're going to rename this prompt. All right. So this is going to be check resume. Right? Check resume. For the instructions, if you are comfortable with AI prompting, and it's typically pretty good at figuring out what it is you want, you can type your instructions in here directly. However, and this seems like a scary thing about AI, the fact that it is able to do this, it's incredibly good. Here in this Copilot area, I can use AI to create my AI prompt. So all you would have to do is describe what it is you want your prompt to perform, and then it will generate that down here and you can make the tweaks as necessary. So let's see what would be a good way to describe what we're trying to get this to do. All right. Let's see, check a provided resume file and evaluate it based on its relevancy. You could probably evaluate it based on several things. Relevancy just is the word that came to mind. Based on its relevancy to a certain working industry. Or rather, let's be even more specific. To a provided working industry. Because we want to let it know that these two things are going to be provided for it. So I want to say that it's going to be a resume file. And I want to say that we're going to provide the industry that we want to compare that to. Return a relevancy score from 1 to 100. Return a relevancy score from 1 to 100 and provide a rationale. All right. Now, the way that I've written this, it should be able to take in two inputs. All right, file and the text value, and provide me with two outputs, a numerical value of relevancy, and I might even want to tell it the direction. I probably shouldn't have to tell it the direction, since from 1 to 100 is pretty general. It can figure that out with logic, and provide a rationale. So it'll write me out a script of why such and such thing does or does not work for this field. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and submit this draft and watch it create my prompt. Now, here is where, if you are following along with me, this can look pretty different. All right? This can look pretty different. So, here's what I've got. You are tasked with evaluating the relevancy of a provided resume to a specified working industry. Okay, that sounds correct. The instructions: analyze the content of the provided resume, focusing on work experience, roles, industries, and achievements. The fact that it expanded on that, I didn't have to tell it what to focus on. So that is great. Compare the extracted information against the requirements of the working industry. Assign a relevancy score. And here you see where it was able to figure it out. So I didn't say what direction it needed to go. It found out 1 indicates very low relevancy, 100 indicates perfect alignment. If yours happened to go backwards, right? Once in a blue moon, AI might make that mistake. If yours happened, well, once in a blue moon. Blue moons aren't as rare as people think, so I still will say once in a blue moon. Once in a blue moon, when it makes that mistake, you can still go in here and make changes to any of these instructions, and then provide a clear rationale explaining the score, highlighting key factors that influence the evaluation. I don't think I even told it to highlight key factors. I just said to provide a rationale. Now, the output format is generally going to be in JSON. All right? It'll respond with a JSON object with 2 parameters: relevancy score and rationale. All right? So here is an example of how that JSON is going to look. Now, scroll down to the very bottom, because there's one very important thing that we all need to have, right? Provide the resume and the target working industry here. You need to have both of these dynamic things here, okay? If you don't have to recreate the prompt, but I want you to add it in, and I'll show you how you can add in areas in this prompt for users' information or dynamic content from earlier in the flow to be applied. For right now, I'm going to say keep it. This looks great to me. So I'm going to say keep it. The resume field, if I click on it, the resume field is a file upload. So if that did not show up correctly for you, trash it and we will add another resume field. The industry field is a text string. All right. So if you needed to get rid of either of those, or if you don't have either of those, it didn't come out for you, this area down here will allow you to add content that can be passed through, add inputs basically that can be passed through into this prompt. So if I click add content here, there's a few different things I can add. The ones we want for these in particular are the image or document that's going to be passed in and the text, all right? So for your resume, it needs to be an image or document, and you'll give it a name. I'm going to go ahead and trash this, but you can see it added it where I had my cursor last. Industry will again be text. Now, once you've got it, you'll notice that the model it's working with is ChatGPT here. So we've got GPT 4.1 mini. You can change the model at any point if you want. I am going to keep the basic model. I am not, I'm not made of money here. I'm not made of AI credits. So I'm going to go ahead and run a test of this, because you're not going to be able to save this prompt until it has been tested at least one time. So I'm going to go ahead and run a test. Whoops. Before I run the test, I do have to provide sample data for my inputs. Okay, so I'm going to come down to these areas, and let's start with the resume. If I click on my resume field, I've got the option to upload an image or a document here. Now, in your student files, which once again, if you don't have them, they will be in the description below. In your student files should be a fictional resume. Now, said fictional resume is just a resume that I had automatically generated. It's just a PDF file that I had generated. It doesn't follow much of a resume format. If you have a PDF resume or a PNG or JPEG on your computer already, feel free to upload it here. Now, this is a good point for me to bring up a limitation of these generative prompts. The types of files that it can handle are PDF, PNG, and JPEG, right? So a Microsoft Word document is not going to work, but if you save that Word document and change it to a PDF, and maybe I should actually say that on my form just to specify in case anyone's using it, change that to a PDF, then it will be able to read it. So I'm going to go ahead and upload the file here, and I saved it on my desktop for this particular course, this fictional resume. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. All right, now my file is uploaded. After that, I'm going to come down to industry, and let's just come up with a sample industry that I want to compare said resume to, right? So I'm going to say nursing. I'm going to say the nursing field, all right? So the resume that I've provided has absolutely nothing to do with the health industry or the nursing field whatsoever. So this should give me a low relevancy score, and hopefully the rationale should explain something very particular relating to my resume, because it is told to point out key points. After you've got something in either of these two fields, go ahead and hit test. Here we go. Now, this is the format that it's going to be putting out in. All right, so it puts out in JSON. Relevancy score is 10%, it looks like. All right. The rationale: the candidate's resume shows extensive experience in project coordination, client services, and administrative roles, with skills and certifications focused on project management and office administration. There's no mention of nursing education, clinical experience, healthcare certifications, skills directly related to nursing or patient care. Now, pause for a second. I didn't feed it anything except the word nursing, right? If you wanted to, if you had a particular thing that you wanted to compare to, right? Maybe a file with a list of job qualifications, you could create another file upload in here. This is where, like I said, you can sort of design this generative prompt to match pretty much any scenario. This is where your imagination comes into play. So you could absolutely use this and run it against another file. But even without the addition of that, it is smart enough to be able to use its own common sense knowledge to create a cohesive rationale. So I am satisfied with the way that this came out. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. All right, now the saving did take a second for me, but when it is done, it will close out that window. Your prompt will now be filled with checked resume. And again, if you wanted to use this in other flows, you could absolutely bring it in here. You can also edit this prompt from this area. So you can make changes to the prompt itself from this area. Now, there are two parameters that can be filled in for this prompt. There are two inputs. So let's start with the industry input. If I go to my dynamic content, from that get response details, I should be able, let's see, what industry would you like to work in? I should be able to find that response there. And I should be able to do the same for the resume, upload your resume. Here we go. The answer to that as well will be passed in here. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and add a new action. And I'll have it send me an email. Very general action. This should be very quick and easy to run. Send an email v2. For the to field, we're also collecting the email address of the responder, right? So if you start typing directly in the to field, you'll be searching your Azure Active Directory. To get dynamic content in here, you are going to have to click this settings gear up here and specify that you want to use dynamic content in this field as well. Now your dynamic content lightning bolt should come up and you can enter the data holding your, let's see, enter your Outlook email address. Now, I really didn't need to collect this field since the responder's email already gets collected as part of a form. But maybe you want it sent to a different address. If so, then this would be the way you could enter that in. For the subject, your resume evaluation has been completed. Relevancy. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put a % here too, because it's going to return a number value. And then I'm going to go to my dynamic content, and from my prompt, I am able to pull my relevancy score. There we go. Explanation. I'm going to go ahead and use my dynamic content here again. And I'm going to put rationale into this field. With all that together, I'm going to go ahead and save my flow. Now, this is a warning that I'm sure a lot of us will end up getting, saying your run a prompt doesn't have an approval action after it. So that is a best practice, and one that we probably won't follow too terribly for our demos today, but when you're using it yourself, you may want to have this. For this particular flow, it's not the most necessary thing in the world. But let's say you were using this same scenario and you were going to be using it to work in HR, right? And you were checking people's resumes that they were submitting in HR, and you were using this prompt. You might want to have an approval action so that it catches somebody, right? You can catch it. You can have a look at the resume yourself, have a look at the response, and then decide whether or not the prompt did its job. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this, since the only thing that it does right now is sends an email back to me with its rationale. So it's not too terribly important. After that, I'm going to go ahead and test the flow. But if you were to have it create records or delete records or send responses to other people, then that is where you might want to be careful and include an approval. We're going to test the flow manually, and then I'm going to come down and hit test, and let me send in a submission. So now on my form screen, I'm going to go into preview, and my email address I'm going to put into here, aperez@pragmaticworks.com. What industry would I like to work in? Let's do something different, but I'm going to use the same resume, right? So what about the communications industry? And then I will upload the same fictional resume here, which seems to be taking a minute. There we go. All right. It was under 100 megabytes. I should have checked the file size at some point when I was looking at it. I'm going to go ahead and hit submit. If your resume is over 100 megabytes, though, it's what are you filling it with? At some point, you know. Now I'm going to come back to my flow here. Ooh. Let's see. Looks like there was an issue. From what I can tell here, it seems like our prompt is looking for the file content of our resume. What seems to have been passed in, however, coming from our get response details, is what looks like a JSON object, or maybe even an array that is holding our resume's information. So we are going to have to find the file content directly to pass it into our prompt. Should be an easy one action fix. Just let me count how far in this is. So it looks like the name of our file is held between these two quotation marks. And if I were to count strings between these quotation marks, there's 1, 2, 3 here, 4, till we get to this file. All right. I know that seems kind of strange, but bear with me here. All right. So here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to go ahead and edit this flow. And what we're going to do is between get response details and run a prompt, we're going to add an action here. Microsoft Forms stores our file content, at least for personal forms, to our OneDrive. So what I'm going to do is add an action for OneDrive that is going to get the file content. And let's see if we can find it here. Get file content using path. So we're going to look for the folder in our OneDrive there where this file is located. If I click on this get file content using path, and I go into the file path here and open up my folder. It's going to be beyond the root folder here, and where this is centered is in the apps folder of your OneDrive. All right. So if you use Microsoft Forms, this folder gets created. If you go next after root and then apps, after that, you'll see Microsoft Forms here. And then your form that is storing files, the resume submission form, you're going to want to hit next because you might have multiple questions asking for a file upload, and each of those gets a different folder. This one here that just says question, we're going to go next. And this seems to be where it is stored. So let's actually just select the question folder here. So let me go ahead and open that back up in the root, and then apps, forms, resume submission form, and I'm just going to click on my question folder. All right, that's going to be, seems I can't click it. Well, I'll go next and select one of these files. So it looks like it's looking for the name of the file here, right? So that's what we need to retrieve. Now, this is going to be dynamic. So we're going to accomplish that with a little bit of string manipulation here. So I'm going to get rid of this file name. And after this slash, I'm going to add an expression. The expression I'm going to add is called split. And I'm going to open up my parentheses here. First thing it needs to know is what is the string we're splitting. So split is going to find a character, and it's going to split whatever is between this instance of that character and the next instance of that character, and split it into a certain amount. So in that split, I'm going to look for dynamic content and put in that upload your resume here. After that, it's going to want a comma, and it needs to know what it's looking for. So I'm going to denote the string value that I'm looking for with an apostrophe. And inside of it, it's going to be the quotation mark. All right? Now, if I leave this alone, it's going to find the first thing that appears, which is the square bracket and curly bracket at the beginning. That's why I counted how far in this split was. What I'm going to do is in square brackets, I'm going to put the number that the split was at, that the file was in our split rather. So that file was number 4. Split functions do start at 0, so it'll be 0, 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put 3 in here. This formula right here should return our file name dynamically after our question. After that, I'm going to hit add. And let me make sure that there is a slash after question. This should get it to find the file content. Now in my run a prompt, all I need to do is trash this resume area here, change it to my dynamic content for file content, and now let's go ahead and run a test. Now, if at first you don't succeed with Power Automate, you can try again as many times as you like, even with the same submission. So if I select automatically, I can use a recently used trigger to try the flow again. So I don't have to resubmit. You can see how many times I did test it to see what was going on there. So I'm going to save and test. This time around, we should end up getting an email. It is being a little bit slow here. Okay, there we go. That's further than we got last time. Well, actually the same amount we got last time, but it failed at this portion immediately. Now my prompt is running. So prompts do take a little bit of time to run, right? It is generative AI here that you're using. Boom, there we go. It took 1 minute and 5 seconds, so it can take a little while. Sometimes I have seen it go really fast. I've seen it go like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, even 2 seconds before. You have to have a crazy PC probably for 2 seconds. But 1 minute and 5 seconds is not bad. It ran through, and now it says it sent me an email. So let's go ahead and see what it has decided to record here. So I'm going to go to that waffle icon and again, use the beauty of single sign-on. Let me click here and I'm going to pull up Outlook. We've got a new email here that is formatted the exact way I was looking for. So your resume evaluation has been completed. Relevancy, 70%. It seems that fictional resume is 70% accurate for communications. Why is that? The candidate has strong experience in project coordination, client relations, and team leadership, which are relevant to the communications industry. Skills such as written and verbal communication, client relationship management, and process improvement align well with the communications role. However, the resume primarily highlights project management, administrative roles without explicit focus on communication-specific tasks. That is amazing. The fact that it was able to find why it limited it by 30%, right? Why didn't it give it 100? The first part seemed like a glowing review, and then it pointed out the key point that was holding us back in this resume. Awesome. Amazing. That was very quick, standard, and relatively easy. We only ran into really one error here, and it was a generally simple fix. So with that, we have a little bit of a foray into how these generative prompts will work. Now, I'm going to go ahead and close this out. All right, and I'm going to close out of this flow and back out. And I'm going to turn this flow off because I don't want to accidentally trigger it one day. Even though it is on its own form here, I am still going to turn it off just in case. All right, so I don't accidentally trigger it. Now that it is turned off, we're going to do another flow with another set of actions from AI Builder that will allow us to further explore these generative prompts, but also see some of the other things that AI Builder can perform without necessarily us having to create an AI model. All right, so let's go ahead and head back to our Create page, and we'll discuss our next scenario. So let's see about another demo and scenario that can show off the capabilities of AI Builder and Generative Prompt and all that functionality. Now, for this next demo, I found myself a little bit inspired by something that we actually built here at Pragmatic Works. So we work very closely with a charity organization called Potter's House, and they do a lot of charity work out in Guatemala. Now, they have a communication system between their sponsors, so people here who can take care of a particular child that this charity is working with, and the treasures, who are the children themselves. So they have a communication system between the two of them, sort of like pen pals. But because the treasures are in Guatemala and the sponsors are typically here from the US, communication can get a little bit frazzled, right? So we created a flow, and really it was an overall solution that would take the communication that was sent, whether it was a letter or email or whatever, and it translates it. And after translating it, it also will check to see if the letter is appropriate, if the letter is going to be readable by that child, if, just in general, checking the intention of the letter so that nothing will get lost in translation. All right? That is sort of what we have built for them. So not all of us are going to work for a charity organization necessarily. So let's think of something a little bit more general. But that just shows off some of the functionality. So what we could do is, let's say we work for an organization that is international. And the head office of this organization, where our boss comes from, is in Mexico. Now, because it is in Mexico, our boss is a Spanish speaker, all right? And he doesn't necessarily speak English. Not only that, he has a reputation among people of both languages to be incredibly wordy with his emails. So it's kind of a nightmare having to take whatever he has sent out, put it through Google Translate at night, and hope and pray that you understood what he was saying, right? So what we can do is we will use generative prompts so that whenever we receive a communication from him, right, and we'll use Outlook again for our example here, whenever we receive an email from our boss or any of the other higher ups, then those emails are going to be automatically translated into English. And we can also have our generative prompt look through the body and see whether or not there are any action items specifically in the email. All right. If so, I wanted to return that to us as well. So let's go ahead and get started. This should be an easier flow to build. And we're not going to be using forms for any of it. So if you've got your form tabs open, you can go ahead and close these. It's just going to be Outlook. All right. This is going to be another automated cloud flow since you are receiving it. It's going to happen whenever you receive something from your boss. So for the automated cloud flow, we will call this our translator flow. I am not firing on all cylinders today, so this is the extent of my creativity. I told you guys to bring your imaginations. Do as I say, not as I do, basically. Now, for the trigger, we're going to look for when a new email arrives. And I'm going to use this when a new email arrives v3. That one is monitoring Office 365 Outlook. So that is the Outlook application as well as Outlook in the web. This one is just monitoring Outlook.com. That one's more for like personal accounts or school accounts. I'll be using this one, after which I'll go ahead and hit create. All right, let's see if that connection fixes itself. Thankfully, it did. Let me go ahead into my trigger here because I'm definitely going to want to filter this down before I set this flow up. Now, I don't know how many emails you guys get in the course of, let's say, next 20 minutes or so, but I tend to get quite a bit. So let's make sure this flow is not kicking off all the time because that will count not only against our flow runs, but also against our AI credits later on. So in our parameters, what I'm going to want to do is only communications from certain people, right? Now I'm going to use myself, okay? So only communications from myself. I'm going to be the stand-in for my boss today, all right? My boss speaks perfect English, but let's just pretend my Mexican boss, my boss in Mexico. I'll be the stand-in for him today. But if you have a particular person who does not speak English that you receive these emails from, then you might want to be able to do that as well for yours. So from, myself here, I'm also going to include a subject filter just because it is going to read emails from myself. And it's going to send me another email later on in the flow, and that's going to come from me too. And so I'm going to get caught in an infinite loop of this flow, kicking off and kicking off and kicking off. So let me go ahead and make sure that that is fixed as well. So in my subject filter, let's see. I'm just going to say test power automate flow needs to be in the subject. All right. So subject filter works as a contains kind of function. So it needs to have the full text string of test power automate flow. It doesn't need to be case sensitive, but it does need to be all together. All right. So very few things are going to trigger this off. I'm also going to tell it the folder that I wanted to monitor. I wanted to monitor my inbox here. All right. Now, we're going to receive this email and we'll receive it in Spanish. If you're wondering where I'm going to get this Spanish from, that is already in your student files. Okay, so remember, student files are in the description. We have in the student files a text file that is holding the text body of a Spanish email. All right. So I'm not going to be testing your 2 years of high school here. So let's go ahead and add a new action. For right now, we will assume that the email will be already written in Spanish. We're going to add an action, and the action is going to be to translate. If you type out translate, AI Builder has a preset action for translating text. This does not require the building of another AI model. These translations are already stored here. So all you have to do is input the action whenever it suits your fancy. So there's plenty of things AI Builder can do, again, without the need of a particular AI model that you have built. I'm gonna go ahead and enter this in here. And you can even have it try to detect the language automatically that it's going to be translating from. Now, if you want to be more accurate and you know it's always going to be the same language, you can select from any of these, whatever language basically that Microsoft has stored. So I'll go ahead and select Spanish directly. The text that I wanted to translate is going to come from my dynamic content. And it'll be the body of that email message. Lastly, I don't even need to translate it to English. Like, I could translate it to English, or I could have it translated to any other language. So if you are sitting in here in this session right now and you're thinking, well, what if English is not necessarily my first language, but I am working internationally? Well, then you can have it either work backwards and translate it from English to Spanish, or you can have it translate from any of these amounts of languages to any of the others. All right. Let me see, where can I find English in here? It's going to be in alphabetical order. Andrew, silly. There we go. Spanish to English. All right. Now, after this is where we're going to add in our generative prompt. Okay? Because this will translate the email, and honestly, we could just go forward with this, and we could just have him send us the translated email, and that'd be wonderful. But remember what our other problem is with our boss here. They don't just speak a different language. They're also very wordy, right? They like putting in 5 paragraphs when they really only needed 2 sentences. So let's go ahead and add another action here for that generative prompt. And I want that prompt to basically condense what gets put out here into something more digestible. All right. So underneath here, I'm going to add an action, and I'm going to use the run a prompt action from our AI capabilities. If I hit this drop down for the prompt, notice check resume, I could bring that back in here, right? I can work any of these prompts into anywhere else. And you know what? This is a prompt that probably is going to have a pretty general use. So, new custom prompt. Again, you could write out the prompt yourself if you are, pretty okay with the instructions. You know how to prompt an AI, but it's kind of easier at the very least to get started. Even with Copilot, it just saves you a lot of time. And we do have a limited time frame here. So I am going to go ahead and use Copilot again, but I am going to try to be very specific. Actually, you know what? Let's make this flow something a little bit more advanced. Let's see how it deals with doing something conditional. All right. So I'm going to say, if take the provided text, and if it contains action items for me to perform, then create one sentence with these items listed out. If not, then condense rather the text into as few sentences as possible while still addressing the main point. There we go. Our main points, rather. All right, so again, something relatively specific, and we're really going to take it for a ride here because this is something that's conditional. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this, and let's see how good it does at handling conditional situations. It looks like it prompted itself fine. So you are tasked with analyzing the provided text to identify any action items directed at the user. Follow these instructions carefully. All right, identify action items. If they exist, create a single clear sentence that lists all these action items succinctly. If they don't exist, condense the entire text, okay? Output format, let's have a look at this. Provide a single sentence listing the action items if any are found. Otherwise, provide a brief summary and 1 or 2 sentences capturing the main points. All right. That seems to be good. That seems like something that maybe we want to do for some of our English-speaking brethren here. So it also says, this is the important part that I want to make sure. We have an area for the input text, all right? We should have a parameter for that. I'm going to accept that. Notice some of the extra things here. Avoid adding information. We know that AI models tend to go and search and see if they can find anything else that fits contextually. So it was able to add that prompt for me based on my given information. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and keep this. And to test the input text. So just as a spoiler, the Spanish email is going to have action items. It's your boss asking you for something, right? To do certain things. So I am going to make sure the input text is just me rambling on. All right. So, hello. My day today was fantastic. You would have no idea the things I went through. Pigs literally flew. The ocean dried up. Man, even mountains were moving. This was the coolest day ever. Also, I'm terrified. I have basically described an apocalypse here, all right? Apocalypse situation. So with this sample data, I'm going to go ahead and test, and let's see how well it does conditionally. This text contains no action items. It expresses that the day was fantastic with extraordinary events and ends with the speaker feeling terrified. That is great. The fact that it recognized, again, in one thing, that it contained no action items, that is great. That's awesome. Notice it's not putting out a JSON object because we only have one output that's supposed to come from this. And so because we only have the one output, it is a text output. So I'm going to get rid of the custom prompt title up here, and I'm going to say this is my email analysis. That's it, just email analysis. I'm going to come down and save this prompt. And for the input text, that's going to come from the emails. All right, the email address. Now to enter the data from the previous step. Now, this is not just going to come directly from that email. Actually, this is going to come from the translated text. I almost forgot this is in Spanish. So this is going to come from the translated text that comes out of AI Builder. that is going to get run through this prompt. After that, we're going to send an email back to ourselves and then put this thing through its paces. So I'm going to add the action to send an email. And I'm still going to pick myself here. And I'm going to make sure whatever subject I pick, it is not test, power, automate, flow. All right. So try not to bring the subject from your trigger back into here. Let's just do translated with analysis. All right. I could even do like email from, and I'll find the, let's see. I'll find from the when a new email arrives, the from field, translated with analysis. There we go. The body of the email, I'm going to say translation. Actually, you know what? Let's do summary first and then translation. Summary. And then we'll go ahead and put the text from our generated prompt. Beneath that, translation. And we'll pass in from there the translated text from AI Builder. With that, we'll go ahead and save, and let's test this flow out. Now, once again, you're going to get that operation warning telling you it doesn't have an approval action. This is probably one you'd want to be checked by somebody. So you'll probably want to add some kind of an approval action here, because you don't want to misunderstand something from your boss here, right? So let's go ahead and go into my Outlook here. And I'm going to send a new email. Send it to myself with the subject test, power, automate, flow. For the text of this email, I'm going to go into my files and open up, it should be a file called message from boss. All right. Message from boss. Here we go. I'm going to take this whole thing, copy it. It's just kind of a template here. And paste this in. And get rid of my email signature since it's not necessarily necessary. Necessarily necessary. Isn't that wonderful there? Told you my imagination wasn't firing off today. After that, I'll go ahead and send this to myself. And let me go back to my flow and wait it out. And see how well it does. And there we go. All right, my flow ran. I actually received the email well before it showed me that my flow ran. You see what I mean? Some of these prompts, they run really quick, right? This one's not crafting out a whole JSON object, so maybe at the end of the day, it's doing less work. The work's kind of split between both of these prompts here, right? But now it is run through, and I have received the other email. Email here. So for my summary, please update the monthly performance report with the latest sales data and metrics, including July's results. Project possible scenarios for August. Include a brief analysis of relevant trends, and have it ready by Friday at noon. Well, let's see. Let me read the translation here and make sure. Did it miss anything? Hello, your name. I hope you're doing great. I wanted to ask you to please update the monthly performance report with the latest sales data and metrics for our team. Okay. We need to incorporate the results of July and project the possible scenarios for August. That was included very nicely, very succinctly. But of course, he likes to get wordy. Also, it would be ideal if you can include a brief analysis of our most relevant trends you've detected. All right, include a brief analysis of relevant trends. Beautiful. Do you think you could have it ready by Friday at noon? This is key for Monday's executive meeting. And have it ready by Friday at noon. Wonderful. Did it ask me for anything else? I look forward to your confirmation. And of course, if you have any questions or need additional data, do not hesitate to tell me. Thank you very much for your collaboration. Doesn't look like any action items were left out here. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have just created another very simple, right? Very minimal work had to go into it. This could be incredibly useful for you. This is a pretty good translation, I will tell you. So reading this one, I am bilingual. Reading this one, this is a pretty good translation of what the two of them were saying. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have created two flows now with generative prompting, each of them showing off different ideas here. All right. There's a lot that can be done with this kind of functionality. And again, hopefully with that, some of your creative juices are flowing here. You've got some good ideas on where you could apply something like this, right? The only limitation, again, is your imagination and also your AI credits, all right? So again, every time that this runs, it does count against your AI credits. They are replenished each month, but it is something that you want to consider. So you might not want to do it for scenarios where you're going to have it run 100 times a day, right? Let me go ahead and back out here. Let's make sure that we turn off this flow as well from the flow details page, because again, we don't want to accidentally trigger it, right? So go ahead and turn it off so it's not running against your flow runs or against your AI credits here. So, ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals, that concludes our little foray into generative prompting with AI Builder. Now, we've really probably only covered about a fraction of what this program could really perform for you, right? I've only kind of played around with forms and Outlook, but in all actuality, you could probably apply this as far and wide of a net as, let's say, over here, we're generating movie reviews for certain movies that have their descriptions uploaded. And over here, we're analyzing trends in our data with this generative prompting. You know, let me just think of something outside of forms. Let's say you have in SharePoint, whenever you create a record, you have an area where this generative prompt is checking and analyzing that record and trying to see if there's anything in particular that it finds interesting about it. On top of that, maybe you could have it put out more values than just text fields, right? You could maybe have it create a Boolean value. So that contains action items or does not. I could have made that a Boolean value. I could have said, return for me a true or false, and then maybe use that as a condition to have my flow go in different directions. You could have it return a number value, a date value, whatever it might be. You could create more dynamic content coming from this generative prompting. So again, a really, really wide array of use cases for this kind of feature. But hopefully, after watching, after getting this little taste of what it can do for you, you're excited to go out and play around with this program yourself. Maybe there's something that you have in mind already that you've been trying to do with some of the preset options that are available. Perhaps this generative prompting is the answer for you. Thank you very much for watching.